An interview with sporting director David Lee from New York City FC, and the opener at Charlotte for the Boys in Blue. That and more coming up on NYCFC Views.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. NYCFC Views.
Collins approaches the shot, and New York City wins the first MLS Cup on their first try, and they're going crazy.
Tiene tiro y gol! Gol! New York City es el campeón de Major League Soccer.
The sickest New York City FC podcast. It's gonna be sick.
All right, I'm Glenn Crooks, Roberto Abramowitz, your radio commentators for New York City FC. It's our first trip to Orangeburg in 2024, the training facility here for New York City. Through training today, it was a pretty late session leading into their Saturday match, the MLS opener for 2024 against Charlotte FC. Roberto, welcome back, and in just a few minutes, we're going to speak to David Lee, an interview we recorded just a few minutes ago for NYCFC Views, and some questions, some answers, and it's always good to hear from David and get his take as to how things have happened. And he was straightforward with how a meeting at the end of 2023 really set in motion what was going to happen in 2024.
Yeah, they went to work immediately after the season, and it was, okay, how are we fixing this, right? Things weren't right. The team didn't make the playoffs. They were below expectations. They knew that they didn't do all the right things, and they needed to find a way to be able to fix this. And when I say they didn't do all the right things, it doesn't end at David Lee or at anybody within NYCFC. This goes even above them. And so there was a lot. There was a lot there to talk about, to understand, where things went wrong and how to be able to fix it for this season.
Yeah, and so he'll detail that pretty specifically and how it impacted the recruiting, which is one of his chief responsibilities. But New York City back from Coachella Invitational, and then the final preseason game, the closed-door scrimmage against Austin FC. We saw a couple of goals scored. Bakrar chipping the former New York City keeper Brad Stuver for one of his preseason goals. And I suppose one of the bright spots, number one, the way the goals occurred, but Bakrar finishing unofficially 5 times in the preseason.
I mean, that's great, right? That's what you want your number 9 to do. And when he came into New York City, coming in mid-season, no preseason, and, you got to hit the ground running. And here's a guy who had only had 8 goals in 38 games previously. So you didn't really know what to be able to expect. It took a while for him to get going with New York City FC. Didn't turn out to be a prolific goal scorer last season, but now with a full preseason and, exactly how they want him to play. And now they brought in some competition as well. We expect to see a much better Bakrar this season, and just offensively in general for New York City. Because if you look at the team and we start looking at all the pieces that David Lee brought in this season, there's a lot of depth. There's going to be a lot of competition for minutes. And I believe also that there's going to be a lot of rotation. I don't think you're going to see a lot of the same team week after week after week. I think you're going to wind up seeing a lot of rotation, especially, once U.S. Open Cup, if that happens, or how it happens, kicks in, and then it's a whole different story.
Well, that's it, kicking it around. We're going to get to the U.S. Open Cup.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
But Leagues Cup, and you have Wednesday games that are going to happen, and New York City has several Friday games. So not Friday, Saturday. But Friday games,
no team has ever won MLS Cup without depth.
Right.
But New York City, and I only say but now. So I've now asked Nick Cushing, David Lee, you'll hear his response in the interview coming up in just a few minutes, and Keaton Parks, who signed an extension as a midfielder for New York City FC, about winning in preseason. New York City winless in their 6 matches with a variety of formations. I should say personnel formations. The way they played was very similar in all the matches. And you contrast that with Charlotte FC. They were unbeaten in their 6 matches, 3 wins, 3 ties, and 4 clean sheets. And New York City a season ago, the struggle to score goals. Now they're on the road. It's going to be a raucous, probably 60,000, in Charlotte for this one. And those are the environments you crave also. But,
and turf.
And so New York City is going to have to get it done away from home.
And look, we remember that last year New York City only had 1 victory on the road. And how about being able to just take care of business that way in the first game? Because then you get rid of a lot of things, right? You don't have to worry about too much about the road and all that, because if you wind up winning, now you have a different feeling about the road. And then also, they've never beaten Charlotte. I mean, that's pretty amazing. It's 3 losses and a tie in 4 games against Charlotte. I mean, and New York City's been around since 2015. Charlotte's only been around a couple of years.
And one of those games last year, New York City dominant in possession. And if you have an opportunity to listen to Nick Cushing, I did get an extensive interview, pretty much a 20-minute sit-down with him out in California. And it's available on this other podcast, On Frame. I like having this On Frame, Roberto. I can just throw up something every now and then.
Nice.
This is consistent, and On Frame is less consistent. But the full Nick Cushing's interview is up there. Burke Risa is up there. And that was the first time I had a chance to speak to him. He's got a baby due any day. He was celebrating any moment, I think is what he said today to us. And the starting left central defender for New York City. But this winning, I want to relate this story to you, Roberto. I already did, but flying home from a West Coast trip, my wife is with me. I'm watching soccer videos. She's watching the Martina Navratilova Chris Evert documentary. Really well done, I'm sure. But she tapped me on the shoulder at one point and said, you gotta hear this. And it was Martina Navratilova. And the one thing she said is during the peak of her career, she didn't know how to lose. She didn't need to be at her best and would still win. And this is one of the things, this is my point as far as feeling that those moments of victory. One thing Nick Cushing said in his press conference today, a lot of the matches they played 90 minutes and then they went off to a side field and played an additional 30. He said in 120 minutes, New York City has won matches in the preseason, but I think the players understand 90 minutes, a lead in almost every match. You surrendered the lead. Again, it could have been with whatever players were out there in the second half. I'm saying my feeling is they need to learn how to win still. That's disputed by others. I'm saying that's what I think.
You can believe that, and I agree. But they have to do that in regular season where it counts. It doesn't matter in the preseason, and that was my point. And we asked Nick Cushing. So if you watch the press conference, his press conference that he held today, I asked him about that. And then with David Lee, who we just spoke with, and you'll see the interview. I asked him basically the same question, and I'm not going to put words in their mouth. I will let him and them be able to say their
How about
answer.
somebody who's on the pitch trying to make things happen? Keaton Parks. Keaton Parks, a couple of weeks ago before Coachella, because the way I framed it was by the end of Coachella, if you're not winning matches, does that concern you? And Keaton Parks was, we need to win. We need to figure out how to win games at the end. Now, was Keaton Parks on the field for some of those matches? He wasn't because of the rotation that occurs in preseason. I get it, but it's a feeling. It's psychology. It's the study of sport. So let's see. Hey, listen, they could go down to Charlotte and win 3-0, 3-1, and maybe all the good feelings will be enough to carry them through the opening stages of the season. But I'm telling you,
it's a better team.
It's a better team. But if they're up 2-0 and lose 3-2, I'm just saying. And again, we certainly hope it doesn't happen. That's until they gain that confidence of winning a game down the stretch when you have to tough it out. And we've heard Nick Cushing say it a number of times now, how if they are up 1-0, one of the biggest things they either learned or knew they had to work on was to keep the front foot, keep attacking, try to get the second goal, try to get the third goal. So
I agree with all of that with a caveat in the regular season.
Well, yeah,
that's it. It's in the regular season because in preseason you're working on tactics, you're working on individual performances, and also you're not playing 90 minutes and you're not finishing games.
Okay, so how was the end of the regular season last year?
I don't remember. Because it doesn't
not many-
matter to me.
Not many
Oh,
losses.
the regular season. you
Yeah,
mean.
right,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So those games counted, right?
No, yeah. But this is a new season, new team. How many
okay.
new players do you have?
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Bakrar will start. Here's my guess: Bakrar, Santi Rodriguez,
Yeah.
Julian Fernandez.
Yeah.
Sands, Parks, O'Toole, Risa, Martins, and Ilinic. So and Freeze. 9 of those 11 started at least a few of those games down the stretch of the season. Fernandez started the last one against Chicago, the 1-0 win. 1-0 win to close the regular season.
By the way, they won their last 2 games
No, they didn't.
of 2023.
No, they did not. They
Yes,
lost
did.
at DC United.
Hold on.
2-0.
Hold on.
Do not count, please. You can't count the messy game. You just said anything but the regular season's meaningless.
But you do count it.
Oh,
so
my
that's why I'm
goodness.
bringing it up,
Oh,
because you
my
do
gosh.
count it, and
All
that was
right.
what do you call it? That was the point. But they won their last game of the season.
Okay. Gabe Siegel, that was official, traded to Houston for a future third-round draft pick. And then he made his debut. I don't know if you noticed that, for the Dynamo against St. Louis in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Houston was up 1-0 in that game, lost 2-1.
Yeah,
St. Louis
they're done.
Winning at home. And that was significant to watch, just if you're a New York City supporter or a broadcaster or part of the team, because week 2, we'll be going to that stadium in St. Louis to see just what this defending Western Conference champions now in their second
Which
season.
would have finished where in the Eastern Conference?
Oh, well, we'll find out from David Lee in a moment. So the sporting director for New York City FC, kind enough to sit with us for a few minutes. So let's play that now. Well, Dave, it's great of you to be with us here on NYCFC Views. I want to go back to something Nick said to me at the Coachella Invitational about the end of the year, that there was in Manhattan at the New York City offices 3 days, 3 14-hour days where everybody got together to really hash out 2023 and see where we're going to go for 2024. What are your recollections from that meeting, whatever you could share with us about, what you learned from each other and how you were going to proceed?
Yeah, I think it was a fantastic experience to go through. I think every year we try and do an end of season review. I think when we had the results that we saw in 2023, we took it even more seriously, and we created a process around really wanting to make sure that we took as many viewpoints as we possibly could from all the departments that contribute to football. And so there was a group of us that went to Manhattan and spent a number of days going over everything. So presentations from Nick and his coaching staff, from myself, from the human performance team, from the operations and logistics team, to really try to understand what we think worked, even despite the results, what we think didn't work as well as we'd hoped, and how we were going to improve. And so the days were split in terms of first just trying to put all the challenges out on the table, and then we spent the next 2 days really trying to understand how we're going to tackle those. And I think anytime you go through a process like that, there's probably 20, 30 things you want to improve, and you have to pick the 10, 5, 7 that are most critical, that we all believe are going to be most critical. If we can improve these 1 or 2 things, or 10 things, or 7 things, it's going to stand us the best chance we possibly can. And so we set about that plan, and we set about the sort of things that we wanted to see, and they covered areas from Nick and his coaching staff to develop. There was areas around the physical performance of the team and increasing the intensity and the work that we do around how we train. There was things around player recruitment and trying to make sure we sign players earlier in the transfer window and having as many players as we possibly could, and staff. So there was a huge bunch of things that really came out, and I think sitting here, pre-season being over, I think the work that we wanted to achieve, I think we've done a good job of that so far. We obviously now go into competition mode, and ultimately we believe that the changes that we've made in how we work and personnel and other things will put us in place to achieve our ambitions for 2024.
From your standpoint, you're part of that meeting and the recruitment process, which is one of your chief duties and roles with the team. How did the data that you received from performance, the desire of Nick and his staff, how they wanted to play, how did that all play into how you were going to take the next steps and bring in the players that would fit that mold?
Yeah, I think so. It's a collective, right? So we sit with Nick, and I sit with Nick, and we spoke a lot throughout the season, obviously, but even more so when the season ends and you're going through the planning process to try to make sure that we have really understood what the aims of the off-season and the players that we're going to bring in and what attributes they need to have. And so, one of those things that people who've watched preseason will have seen is we want a higher intensity when we're off the ball and when we're in defensive moments. And so we needed to both implement a plan of how we're going to help our current players achieve that. And there's a whole physical work that goes into that from Dave Howarth and his fantastic human performance team that have done a brilliant job in sort of periodizing the preseason. And then there's trying to find players that can also add and sort of turbo boost that because they bring that maybe naturally. And so that was a key part of all of the work we did when we were assessing players, is how we thought they would fit into our
Do you not
group.
see the data when you say do it naturally? Do you not see the data on those players you're recruiting? I mean, is that part of the analysis? What they've done throughout their careers and in their matches.
There is some data that is useful in terms of off the ball. However, most of it is done through proprietary information. So teams will have GPS data and tracking data that isn't readily available in every league or in many leagues. And so there's some that we can see and that we can measure with data. There's some that you can only see when you go and watch a player or get a better idea when you watch a player. So we're trying to combine both, but the physical data in general is quite hard to come by in not the same way as sort of the touch data and on the ball data that you can get through an Opta, StatsBomb and these providers.
As you were approaching the season and how, the players that you're going to bring in and, how are you going to improve the team, were you sort of surprised or at all that the salary cap didn't change considering the players that Inter Miami brought in and were planning on bringing in, and to do that and stay under the cap? Were you sort of expecting any sort of change, or did you think that it was going to stay the same and you just worked under, what the rules were at the moment?
Yeah, it's always difficult to know in MLS what rules will or won't change. We plan on the rules staying the same. And then, the reality for us is if those changes were going to be implemented, that would have been November and December, or you would have heard about them in November and December. It's quite late to then plan for January. And so to really maximize your resources and the roster rules that you have. So I think what Miami have done is fantastic, and they've been able to bring some really high caliber players, but they've also had to sell Gregor and do other things to make sure they're compliant. We all have the same rules to work within. They've obviously done a marvelous job in bringing some really high profile older players into their group within the salary budget, and I think we look at it from our view, which is we knew we had these resources, we had under 22 spots, we had salary cap space, we had allocation money, and we were going to go and attack the off season with using the resources that we had to try to make sure we could bring the best players we could. If rules change in the future, then we plan and adjust, and I think there's been lots of talk, and I think Commissioner has been, and I think Todd Durbin as well has been on the record in the last week or so regarding reviews that are happening, and I can't wait to see what the result of those are. I'll probably find out maybe a couple of minutes before the public does, as normal. And when we know what that'll look like, it will change how we approach building a roster to compete at the best level it possibly can.
Is there anyone from the New York City Football Club or City Football Group on that committee that you referred to? There's a report that they're meeting at end of February, and maybe by the summer there'll be some news.
I don't know if it's confidential or not, so I don't know if the members are public or not. But what I can say is that genuinely the clubs and the people at the clubs aren't involved in that process, and so we don't hear any information that is done by the league purposefully and intentionally on their part to have those discussions. And then when decisions are made, then we will find out as sporting directors, general managers, along with pretty much everybody else.
Recruitment 2023 versus 2024. A word that Nick used was we were more decisive in 24, and that's apparent with a number of players that are already in at his disposal here early in the season. But why was there a difference? What made it more decisive this time around?
I think there's a number of factors. I would definitely agree, more decisive. The first factor is if I look back at the roster and as we headed into 2023 preseason, we needed 6 or 7 players that were capable of starting in our team and depth. In MLS, you have a bunch of resources to use. And as you allocate those resources, they're gone from other players. So you spend a little bit more here, you have a bit less to spend here. And when you have so many gaps to fill, it becomes really difficult to commit. The easy ones to commit to are the high-level players that are very affordable on the salary cap. Those players aren't particularly common. And so in general, it made it really difficult, and we just had so many pieces to fill in that it was hard to be really clinical and decisive without knowing the impact on, if we sign this player, we have to go after, it will cost us this left back. And this offseason, we went into it with the base of what we feel is a really good team and have performed well at the end of last season. And so we were able to just be much clearer on, we need these 5 or 6 things in our group and in our team. And I think the other part is, my experience having gone through this now, been here for 10 years, is head coaches have a huge desire to find the best possible players to bring to their team. That's absolutely normal. Every head coach we have had in their first transfer window, it's a challenge. They haven't gone through that process of knowing what the cap rules are and knowing, okay, well, if we take this player versus this player. And over time, I think they learn to trust the work that we've done and the knowledge that we have from a scouting group to recommend sort of the best possible options.
I'm visualizing them shaking their head quite often in those early meetings.
In general, the quote that I probably have heard the most is, there must be better. Like, there must be better. And over time, you just go through that process. And, I think the players that we were able to acquire last year, I think everybody's able to see that they become really important players. And as you have more experience going through that, it becomes easier to be decisive. But it was a very, very difficult window last year with, so many holes to fill. Now, reflecting back, I think it would be close to impossible to address all of that in one transfer window really effectively. And I think now we look back over the 3 transfer windows from winter. We signed Matt Friis, Mitro Ilinic, we brought James Sands back, Santi Rodriguez, key really important players. Then we move into the summer and we have Bert Grieser, Munsif Bakra, Andres Pereira joined on loan, and at least initially. And now we come into this window where we've added even more quality and depth. And it's just taken a long time to really build the level of competition and depth that we really want. And it was a real challenge last year for sure.
So when you have this influx of talent, and I think something's off of my mic, but hopefully you're hearing this. When you have this influx of talent, what's a measuring stick for you of what is a successful season?
I think the simplest and most basic explanation for us is, we want to, this club, our fans deserve to have a team that can compete for trophies. We know in MLS it's very rare you win trophies every single year, but we have to compete for trophies. The only way to do that is to finish in the playoffs first. The best way you can compete for trophies is to finish as high as you possibly can in the Eastern Conference. Us going on our run in 2021 and 2022 and needing to play so many games away is not typically conducive to winning a lot of trophies, so that made it more challenging. So I think it's difficult to say, sitting here now, if we finish in the playoffs, we're going to be happy. It is the expectation that we return to the playoffs, and that is what we feel we have built everything around, is making sure we can finish in the playoffs, and ideally as high up the Eastern Conference as we possibly can. And we think we've tried to put the resources to make sure that we give ourselves every opportunity for that to happen.
One of your new players that's come in, Jovan Mijatovic, the 18-year-old Serbian striker. His quote in the New York City FC press release, here it is, quote, "Get ready to cheer. I will score many goals." Maybe that wasn't in the release. It was in the interview with him, or one of those things. What do you think of that? That's confidence.
Jovan's a confident boy. He has an absolutely amazing mentality. I think it was one of the things as we got to know Jovan that really convinced us of what he will be able to do here, and ultimately how he'll be able to maximize his career, is how determined he is to be successful. And I think he has all the attributes we think that will be a successful player for New York City FC and in MLS. And ultimately, I think, being only 18, there's obviously the opportunity for him to develop his career and potentially play in European leagues, which I know will be his ambition. I think he's very confident. I think we have to understand he's 18 years old and it's his first move outside the country, and so he will probably feel like he can run, and hopefully he can really, really fast. But our job is going to be supporting him through that transition that is, we know from hundreds of players we've signed over the sort of 10 years, can be challenging. We'll support him through that so that he can focus on his football and perform and play at the highest level he can. And I'm looking forward to seeing him play in our team and giving competition for Munsef, who's been fantastic as well, and has been a really big addition last year. And that the combination of both of those strikers, I think, gives us a real opportunity to achieve what we want this season.
So when you look at your team now, and you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, which are the teams that you've seen that have improved themselves the most?
It's really difficult to know because you don't want to overestimate preseason or underestimate it. It's just hard until you really get into competition. I think Atlanta were really strong at the end of last season, and I think have added some good pieces. Obviously, they lost Miles Robinson, but we know Gregerson quite well. I think he has the attributes to be a successful MLS player. So I think they've improved. I think Columbus were excellent. Obviously, they won MLS Cup. That's pretty obvious. They were excellent last year, and I think Wilfred does a really good job as a head coach, and so I'm quite sure they will even continue to take further steps forward. But honestly, when you look at the Eastern Conference, it is absolutely brutal this year in particular. I think there was a stat that St. Louis won the West last year with a points total that wouldn't have won the East in the last 7 years. And it shows how strong the Eastern Conference is and has been. And I think a few years ago, it was quite typical that the Western Conference always appeared to be a little bit ahead of the East. But you look at the depth and the competition in the East, and it is going to be a really competitive conference this year, no doubt. And I didn't mention, but Miami is probably the obvious one. I probably should have mentioned.
I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
I mean, they improved themselves quite dramatically last summer as well, and so the other additions now just make them even better.
David Lee, Sporting Director, New York City FC, with us here on NYCFC Views, and I wanted to ask if there is some sort of Serbian connection. So Strahinja Tanasijevic, thank you. He has not arrived yet, but it's a center back from Serbia. They played on different clubs, but is there some sort of connection there at all?
Nope. There was no connection prior to us. They happened to both overlap. Strahinja's did his medical in Manchester on one day, and Jovan was doing his the next day. So they overlapped and got to have dinner together, which was quite nice. But other than that, no connection between the two of them, other than having been in the same league.
So Glenn and I have had this discussion on the podcast, and maybe you've heard it. So I always talk about preseason and what's important in preseason, which is evaluating talent, trying tactics. It's a chance to really, really experiment. I don't hear anything anymore. It's a chance to really, really experiment. And when you look at preseason, how important are results for you? As far as like 0, doesn't matter, 10, it's like absolute key. Where do you put that as far as now trying to get into this season and have a winning record and make the playoffs and take a run, once you're there?
It's much closer to 0 than 10, that's for sure. I don't know how I'd put it on the scale. Results are important. Everybody in this building is a competitive person. You don't end up working in professional sports and professional soccer if you're not highly, highly competitive. But it is not the be-all and end-all for us as we enter the season. We would have liked to won more games. Of course, we would have done. It's generally a good thing. But I've been part of pre-seasons where we've won loads of games in pre-season and not had as successful season as we wanted. And probably there's hundreds of stories of teams who have won every pre-season game and have a disappointing year. So I don't think they are generally instructive. I think we're trying to take fundamentals from what we have in the plan in terms of the physical output, in terms of the tactics that we want to see, in terms of the variations in formation or different things that we want to implement in the season. And that's the goal for us in preseason. Of course, winning is a part of that, but it's not something that we look at as a real key indicator of whether preseason was a success or not.
I would like to follow up because I'm the one who brought up the fact that I thought coming off of last year, and Nick disagreed, and I used the words learn to win. But I look at the Miami game where it was a late draw in stoppage time for them. You go to DC United, must-win situation. It didn't work out. And now in preseason, even Keaton Park said early on to us that finding a way to win, going up and holding on to the lead, knowing that it could have been academy players or two players that were out there in the second half, and that's how it was equalized. Whatever the construction of the team, there were leads in a majority of the games, and they were surrendered. So you don't subscribe to maybe the fact that maybe not being able to pull out the wins in at least one of those games doesn't provide some sort of impetus for the start of the season.
I think we'd have preferred it if we did, but I also don't think it means or should mean that we have any negative view going into Charlotte, given we're going to assess the performance as a whole. And in general, there were reasons why we did concede leads through preseason. And so for us, I think it's a part of the calculus of preseason, but it's a relatively small part. Certainly we would have preferred to win, but I think we know the reasons why in many of those games we weren't able to hold on to that win, and we're very comfortable where we are and really optimistic, positive. We've got a great opportunity in front of us this weekend, and we want to go and attack it.
So I don't know what your salary cap situation is at this point, but the transfer window is open until April 23rd. So are you done bringing in players, or is there still a chance of more talent coming in before the window closes?
We're not expecting to add any more international talent. So we have our 3 DP spots filled, we have our 3 U22 spots filled, we have 10 international spots that they are filled, we have 20 senior roster spots that they are filled. So we have some supplementary roster spots available that we may look to add some more depth to in the coming days. But a key goal for us was building our roster as strong as we possibly can from day one. In general, I think my approach, I like to keep a bit of room back because you never know what injuries you might get, or to adapt and adjust as the season goes. I think given what we experienced last year, we wanted to make absolute clear that we are going for this year, and we're going to put every resource we can on the table to get as early as we can so that we can compete as best as we possibly can from day one. So not anticipating any more signings. We would need exits in order to bring new signings in at this point, and we're not planning on any of those right now. We're really happy with the group we've got.
And finally, David, part of the reason you want to build a roster, build depth, is because of the congested schedule at times. One of those things that seems to be still in that nebulous phase is U.S. Open Cup. Do you have an opinion about that as far as your club is concerned in particular?
I think my opinion is the U.S. Open Cup is a really prestigious, important tournament. I understand the challenges that come with it, and they are real, and they do add additional fixtures, and some of those fixtures aren't ideal. I think we're not super involved in those discussions, and so I don't know what the output of those will be, but we support the league in what they want to do, and ultimately Major League Soccer is trying to drive and look after the clubs the best they possibly can, and so I'm as interested to know what will come out of those discussions as everybody is, but it's a prestigious tournament with a trophy on the line. We want to win more trophies and bring more trophies here, and so if we compete in that, we'll be going at it to try and win it.
I guess that's it for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Roberto. David Lee, sporting director, New York City FC, seems in a good frame of mind. No regular season games played yet, but we do know that the roster is deep, especially when you compare it to 2023.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, aside from maybe left back, okay, you can look at this roster and say, you got 2-3 different players who can come in at a moment's notice and play like a starter, right? And they'll be competing for all these jobs. And that's what makes practice really interesting. And this is when people say, well, MLS isn't competitive and it's a retirement league. It's crazy because you have to go to practice. Every one of these guys wants to play. Every one of these guys wants to start. And they're killing each other, not killing each other, but killing themselves.
Yeah, but there's one injured player, right?
Yeah.
Maximo Morales coming off the ACL. everyone else is fit to play.
Absolutely. So then you've got these guys who want to play. They're going to be guys who are going to be on the bench, who you would expect to be starters, and they're going to be guys who are not in the 18 or 21 or whatever it is these days that aren't going to be, on the bench that you would expect to play. And so the competition for minutes, for time, and for attention is going to be crucial this year, and it's great. It's good. It's just going to make everybody better.
So we learned Strahinja Tanasijevic. I think that's the way David Lee corrected me as far as the pronunciation. The defender, the Serbian, not here yet, so they're still working things out. Tell me, Augustine Ojeda. Augustine Ojeda.
All right.
Arrived today. So we're recording this on Thursday. He actually arrived today, and if all things check out with MLS, according to Nick Cushing, he could be available for the opener. We would doubt, though, that he would play in that because he's just gotten here. And then the other kid, Jovan Mijatovic, who said, "Get ready to cheer. I will score many goals."
Mijatovic. We got to get this right.
Mijatovic. Thank you, Mijatovic.
Third syllable from the end.
Mijatovic, and I've butchered it before, and I'm going to do my best.
Yeah, I know
to
you'll
never
get it.
do it again.
No, I trust in Glenn.
So he's here, but he also still has more paperwork to be complete before he can train full and compete in a match. So, but that's close. Ojeda's close. We don't know about the center back yet, but everybody else ready to go for the Charlotte match. And Charlotte under new leadership, Dean Smith, whose claim to fame, Aston Villa, getting them promoted as the manager there. Working with a guy named Ollie Watkins, who's now a legitimate Premier League goal scorer. He had him at Brentford, brought him with him to Aston Villa on a transfer. So, and one of the things I asked Dean, and I'm going to put this up on my podcast On Frame too, is Enzo Capetti. He's a good number 9, but inconsistent, kind of in and out of games. And I asked Dean about that, and he said, all he said was like, you just need to put an arm around this guy, make him feel good about himself. And I think this is a quality. The thing you learn about Dean Smith when you're down there and you're with some of the people involved in the club is that he is so liked by everyone, from the chef to everyone. So there's a great deal of preseason love going on now at Charlotte FC, but certainly that doesn't necessarily lend itself to victories and points. Christian Latanzio, who Nick Cushing was pretty close to from the City Football Group days, and he was sacked, and a much different style. Christian was very much possession oriented, moved the ball in certain spots, kind of positional play. Dean Smith's going to be more direct. So Thiago Martins and Burke Reeves, get your air game ready. And with New York City now pressing higher up the field, the challenge is on for those two because they're going to be isolated at times on that counterattack. It's going to be Martins against Capetti or Risa against Capetti, I'm sure, on more than one occasion on Saturday night. So we'll see what happens. By the way, though, that game, Saturday night, is going to be broadcast on the New York City FC network in English and Spanish. And that's nycfc.com/radio. So our advice, as always, is to turn down the sound on the TV, sync us up so you can listen to the audio. Take your pick, English or Spanish.
And complain to Apple that they're not broadcasting the away radio.
As far as we know.
And absolutely complain about the fact that they're not broadcasting Spanish radio.
Yeah, lots of complaints there.
Yes, absolutely. You're paying a lot of money for that, for having season pass, which is great. Love season pass, but you deserve to get your Spanish radio and your English radio that's away.
I want to get back to get ready to cheer. I will score many goals.
That's great.
Did you like that?
It's fantastic. That's what you want. I mean, that's what you want.
18 years old. But he scored 8 goals with 2 assists in 14 games for Red Star, Belgrade. Is it Belgrade or Belgrade? Belgrade, I believe, is the way it's pronounced. having difficulty with the pronunciation.
Yeah,
today,
it is. Well, it's foreign.
But those are good. Those are good numbers, including 4 goals and an assist in the last 5 games. And so that's what we've got coming in. He's going to compete with Bakrar. The other thing on the New York City FC pregame show on the English side, I've got Nick Cushing with me, presented by Ford, each and every match. And in this one, I asked him about Mijatovic or Bakrar as the number 9. Is he going to have to choose between the two? And they have different tools, as it's been described to us before, where Mijatovic will come into the midfield to get the ball and make things happen, while Bakrar wants to run the channels more and get in behind. And that is a good compliment. And so Nick said, I don't think it's his preference or first choice to go with twin strikers, but maybe there's a way to fit him in
because they complement each other when they're going to be on the field based on the way that they play. There's a very good chance that they're going to wind up complementing each other. And although they're not going to start with 2 strikers, or if they do, it's going to be a shock. I wouldn't be surprised if in the last 20 minutes of the game, if you're down a goal, you need another goal, that you're not going to put them both on the field at the same time. Now, on the Spanish radio side, I got a chance to speak to Santi Rodriguez and talking to him about a little bit about last season, about preseason, about what's coming up this season, his maturity, his leadership. And, because he is one of the leaders on this team, although he says, there are guys that are younger than me, there are guys that are older than me. But yeah, I have to assume a larger role as far as a leader on this team.
Was that the biggest point of the interview to you? Is that
I think it's
looking
one
to
of
take
them.
over? Yeah,
I think they're all happy that they, as we say in Spanish, borrón y cuenta nueva, which basically means, we're starting all over again. I'm teaching you a little Spanish here. So we're starting all over again, and they got to,
that's the way they're thinking about it.
You get a chance to make
a
up
reset.
for it.
I think resets are important.
Absolutely.
And certainly coming off a non-playoff season. And we've heard now Nick Cushing and David Lee. You've heard him talk about kind of that reset as the group, the whole technical staff, the performance staff, that backroom staff all got together right after the end of the year to kind of hammer out the way they wanted to do things and then who they were going to recruit. CONCACAF Championship Cup. I'm sure everybody watched Miami last night and Inter Messi and. Messi did his thing, and
that was MLS. Messi last
night. Oh, that was
MLS.
Right. See, I've missed. Yeah, that was MLS.
Wait a second. That was the 2-0 win over Real Salt Lake. Not an impressive win for Miami. I'm sorry. They shored more holes than anything else. This is not a 90-minute team.
They were tired, but remember they looked tired off of this big trip, and that was to be predicted.
Yeah,
it was to be predicted.
But they've been at home for the last 2 weeks, and they played Newell's at home and all that. But this is going to be a team. And meanwhile, Real Salt Lake missed so many sitters in this game. Yep. So it's really not impressive for Inter Miami. I don't think it's for anybody who thinks that they're going to be a juggernaut and they're going to run away with everything. Now, I just really don't see it. Wait till they hit the dog days of summer, and they got to be traveling 6,000 miles across the country, and then playing in the 100-degree temperatures in Texas and things like that. It ain't going to be fun.
Well, and Luis Suarez, who assisted on the last goal, and it was kind of interesting that he wasn't subbed, maybe at an earlier moment of the match in this MLS opener. Forgive me, but he was laboring, it seemed, and I don't know. We've already, we've heard extensively about a knee issue where he's got treatment going on and shots that he has to get in the knee, and you just wonder how much this guy's going to practice. Number one, not that is that going to be that big a deal when it comes to the final product? I mean, he's trying to work and have relationships with people other than Messi and other than Alba and other than Busquets, who he's got to play with.
Right.
But a wonderful Messi to Suarez for the final goal of the match, which really sealed it by Diego Gomez.
Yeah, it was a nice goal. Now, the other thing is that with Suarez, right? Taylor Twellman on the broadcast last night said that, he was really laboring. So he's there and he's watching him run off the ball or, when the camera's not on him.
Exactly.
So he's seeing that. And I think you're going to get to see a lot more of a Julian Carranza than, right? Was it him?
Yes.
Okay.
Not Carranza.
That's the guy from
the other
Philly.
Carranza's at Philly. He had a hat trick in the.
I'm getting it confused.
Now you've made me forget who he is. But
I know I do this all the time. Sorry, Campana, right? Leo Campana.
Campana. Yeah.
That was it. So
That's okay.
So Campana only played. He only came in the 90th minute. I mean, he's a guy who's going to be able to score and do well for Inter Miami, and I think he's going to, especially now. I think that he's going to wind up playing. So they played Wednesday and they play Saturday. They play the Galaxy. So
Sunday they play Sunday
against the Galaxy.
Yeah.
So I would think that in games like that, you're going to get to see a lot more of Campana than just Suarez playing 90 minutes, which I thought was sort of excessive.
Let's kick it around. Referees and U.S. Open Cup. That's how we're going to close the show. I mean,
oh boy,
it's. I guess let's start with the referees. And Roberto, I think you'll find this interesting. Sirius XM-FC, where I'm a host on the show called The Coaching Academy. Tony Miolda, former national team player, he's a U.S. Soccer Hall of Famer. Brian Dunseth, his co-host. They interviewed both Mark Geiger, who is the general manager of Pro Referees. They are the management side and have locked out the referees. Pete Manikowski is the lead negotiator for the Referees Union, PSRA. The interesting thing here is that Manikowski and Geiger are friends. They know each other well. They've worked an MLS Cup final together as referees, but now they're on opposite sides of the table. So, we're going to play a few clips here from those interviews on Sirius XM-FC. Again, it's Miola and Dunseth. And first, Mark Geiger, who said he was disappointed. And the reason he was disappointed because there was a tentative agreement by the negotiating committee for the union led by Peter Manikowski.
Pretty disappointing situation that we're in. So we've spent the past 4 months with the PSRA and their representatives at the negotiating table. We did, as you said, came up with a tentative agreement last week. The officials were educated by the PSRA. They held a vote on Thursday and Friday, and overwhelmingly, they voted it down. It's really unfortunate because we did have a tentative agreement, meaning that the negotiating team from the PSRA agreed to the terms and conditions with Pro. We offered them a no strike, no lockout clause throughout the 2024 season so that we can continue negotiating, and they turned that down. So unfortunately, we needed to make a difficult decision and lock them out because there was a risk always that they could go on strike at the last minute. We wanted to make sure that the MLS season was able to continue as scheduled.
So a lack of trust there between management and the referees, and that was Mark Geiger pictured there, Jersey boy, if I could point that out, and a guy who he was certainly one of the more decorated referees in our history, American referees, and now he's in this unenviable position of, in essence, trying to negotiate in some ways against the people that he was a part of at one point. It's crazy.
I was listening to the football show on the way up here to Orangeburg, and I was listening to Felipe Cardenas, who writes for The Athletic and a friend of the show, a friend of ours. And he was talking about that they thought that they had 95% that it was a done deal, and they was shocked that it wound up.
It was 95% the other way. 95% turned it down.
Yeah, well, and then there's that. So, what kind of a disconnect was there between PSRA and their own referees that they thought that they had a deal, but 95% of the referees turned it down?
I'm glad you asked that question because Pete Manikowski is the lead, and he's going to explain it here as he did to Tony Miolda and Brian Dunseth here.
Did over the course of the negotiations was we really warned Pro that the offers that they were making had a real bad chance and a real concerning chance of ratification, and we continued to tell them. And our negotiating committee, which is made up of me, of course, our attorney and 4 active referees, we had to decide. Are we going to keep negotiating, or are the members going to have to speak and have their turn? And that's exactly what we did. The members got their turn to speak, and the members turned that deal down.
So it's pretty interesting. He really seemed to have a good notion that the referee group was not going to approve, yet he still pushed it forward because it was so close to opening day. So you almost...
I read it differently.
Okay.
See, the way I read it is this, that the reason they accepted it was to show MLS or Pro, whoever.
MLS.
Okay,
Go ahead.
to show them what the referees really thought about this. So you can say in negotiations, we don't want this. But then when they say, all right, fine, this is what your best offer is. Okay, we accept. Let's bring it to the membership. And then the membership said, and 95% of the membership says, yeah, this is a no-go.
95.8.
Okay, to be exact, which is very good.
Yeah.
Now, according to some of the things that I heard today on the way up, was the financial offer is it's a substantial raise, which makes them paid like some of the best, if not the best paid referees.
Not the best paid referees. So one thing, Mark, but I'm just going to interrupt because I heard the Felipe Cardenas interview, and I think he had this wrong.
Okay.
Because Geiger said that was misinterpreted because there was a tweet put out by pro referees or MLS saying that they've been, it read like that MLS officials are being paid with the best in the world. He said Germany, no. La Liga, Spain, no. What Mark Geiger said is that the referees would be in the top 10% of the leagues around the world. So that's just a clarification.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. That's great.
And that's from Geiger, the guy who pushed it through.
Right, because that's what I had heard today. So it's great that you gave me that clarification from Mark Geiger.
Now, Pete Manikowski, one more cut from him, and I think this is interesting because, like you said, the money is probably less the issue than some other details like travel. Mm-hmm. And this is Pete Manikowski again, the lead negotiator for the referees union, PSRA.
And like every union does, we have a duty to survey our members and find out where they're at so that we can most democratically determine what our next proposals are going to be. So we're doing that. We're doing that right now, actually. And I think I'll talk about travel for a minute, right? So on travel, we're not asking to be in first class on every flight, right? That's not our current position, and that's not something that we think is part of responsible growth. Do I hope we get there someday? Absolutely. Do we hope to mirror the other officials that travel around for Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so forth? Yeah, we do. And we'll get there someday. But that's the way that people travel, the flexibility that they have. They take the 3:00 flight, 6:00 flight, are still issues that we face. Do we have people being put on a 6 a.m. flight when they would prefer to sleep in and do their recovery after a match a little bit better? Yeah, we want that language. So those are things that, some of the detailed things that we're still asking for, which is just improvements in the way that we move around the country. And Tony, some of our folks are going on the road 200 days a year, right? And when you were a player, you remember that, right? It's a long time on the road, and the best travel conditions that you can get to be away from your family that long are things that are really important to our membership. So we're talking about those things, and we'll find a compromise. I'm sure we will find a compromise. It's a matter of when and for how much.
Well, I have it. Tony, he's talking about Tony Miola, who certainly traveled a lot as a player, but that's interesting. I never thought about that. Referees, the full-time referees on the road, some of them 200 days out of the year.
Yeah, it's a lot. And
because every 2 weeks they go to Minnesota or to Dallas,
I think,
where they have training. It's required every 2 weeks. They're in a couple of 3 days of training. And they
in
review
Minnesota,
things, which is
evaluation.
Good,
I believe in Minnesota it's evaluation, and in Dallas might be the training part. Yeah.
Okay. So, but either way, they're identifying their weaknesses. They're trying to get better, and I've always liked that part of it. I mean, the referees really work at it, and pro referees really provides the service of education and evaluation and trying to make it better. So,
and there's a lot of transparency as well, which is very good.
Yeah, and Corey Rockwell is one of the senior-most referees, and we know that outside of Pro headquarters in New York City. There was some picketing yesterday, but here's Corey Rockwell's tweet, just because the MLS Players Association put out a note of support on Twitter or on X, a note of support for the referees. And Corey Rockwell basically said, thank you very much. Very classy and appreciated. So that's the referee situation. So they're, as of right now, as of Thursday, they haven't gotten together again. And we've got a weekend of games, 14 games coming up on Saturday and Sunday, where it will be all replacement officials.
Yes.
And replacement VARs and AVARs. So that's 6 per game times 14 games. That's 84. I don't think, unless there are some repeat performances in the VAR booth, which is possible because it's all coming from one spot in Atlanta. So I'm not sure about that. They haven't really
that's going to change, by the way, because they have a new system. And it was going to be, I believe, somewhere in Texas. They just announced this today. I got the email that they have a new system for VAR that is going to handle this.
Have they already moved?
And well, I would presume so, considering that
I know that was in the works. But
yeah,
and then none of the rules that we went over last week that Roberto kindly sent and we reviewed it, but a majority of those. Like the substitution, the sub has to get off in 10 seconds, or the guy waiting to come on has to wait an extra 60 seconds. If he doesn't, they're putting those on pause until the regular referees.
So let me give you this. So the
Okay.
new center is going to be in Arlington, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas, where the Cowboys play at AT&T Stadium. And it's with Sportech Solutions, who has been they have implemented successful VAR and goal line technology, according to the press release, rollout at the start of the 22-23 season in the Bundesliga. So they will be the new people taking care of VAR.
Are they there now?
Starts this season. So yes. So
starting this season.
At the start of the
just to
2024.
be clear, you mentioned goal line technology. That is not happening.
No, that's not part of it.
It's
They just implemented that in the Bundesliga, but they're implementing VAR now here. So it's going to be wow. So yeah, the announcement comes 12 months after MLS signed a long-term deal with Sportech Solutions.
So you've got Sportech, a whole new approach, and replacement officials. Very interesting. But the first game with the replacements, there weren't really any VAR things to consider. Everything was outside the area where there were some questions, but I thought all in all they did pretty well.
They did fine last night, nothing terrible. But here's the thing, okay? Let us remember what happened in the NFL. And Don Garber knows something about the NFL, considering he comes from there, okay? When the NFL had the same problem and the referees were on strike, and then there was a whole slew of games that they were played. There was one game in particular where Green Bay was affected. And I don't remember if they won or they lost, but it was at the end of the game, and something was either called definitely incorrectly. And I don't know if it was either a touchdown or interception, but it absolutely changed the game. And everybody was up in arms. Next day, the referees were back. And you have now 14 opportunities for something like that to happen this weekend, or 13 opportunities. No, it's going to be 14 because they've got Miami plays again, and so does Arsenal, right? Okay. So 14 opportunities for something to screw up this weekend, and maybe in a major way, and that will get things done. 14, so basically, as somebody once said in MLS, and I forget who it is just root for chaos. And you get this solved.
I just want the drama on the pitch, but 14 times 6, that's 84 replacement officials necessary for these games this weekend. So who knows how long this will go on. All right, let's get to the U.S. Open Cup. That's it. MLS is in the middle of this one too. There are reports, totally unconfirmed, that only 8 first teams in Major League Soccer will participate in the U.S. Open Cup this summer, and the remainder will be the MLS Next Pro sides within those franchises. Asked Nick Cushing about both the referees, and he's just, Nick's good about the referees. I mean, he rarely, he basically says, we've got 90 minutes plus to be in control of our own destiny. We're not going to be concerned by a referee's call, and that's the best outlook anyone can have for it. He's supportive of the U.S. Open Cup because it's a chance for a trophy, as is David Lee, chance for a trophy, but it remains to be seen what's going to happen there.
What bothers me, now I can understand with MLS saying, okay, we'll send you 8 teams, right? Okay, we can't send all of our teams, but we'll send you 8 teams. So we're not going to send you the teams that are playing in
CCC,
right? In the Champions Cup. We're not going to send you those teams. We'll send you other teams, etc.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be fair that some teams are able to compete with their first teams if they like, and other teams are being forced to perform with their second teams or MLS Pro teams. And how would that look? Right. So I don't know how this is going to work out.
But we've talked about this before.
I'm waiting for the announcement. Just play the
no,
damn
but
games.
why? I'm sure this came up when I can't remember if we talked about it on here or we talked about it off air and on the phone. I can't remember. But when this was all in discussion, when that initial report came out that where MLS said our teams aren't playing, we're just sending our 2 teams, and then the hit the fan. So
as it should have.
Why just let the coaches decide how they want, and sporting directors and clubs decide how they want to manage their games? If they want to play, make it feasible, make it roster compliant in some fashion that you could use academy 2 kids and MLS Next Pro players or your senior players. However you want to do it, let the clubs decide that. And I don't understand why they're going through all this. It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary, yeah. I think.
But I understand part of the reason why MLS is trying to do this, but it's also their own doing, right? Because they added Leagues Cup, and there's a lot of games for a lot of teams, minimum of 2 games, and if you win one of them, then you're playing 3 or more. So what they're trying to avoid is so many games in X amount of windows. So that might be
every team has all this physical data. If you don't want to play Maximo Morales, you don't play him. You play Maximo Carrizo. How about Maximo Carrizo getting to play in a U.S. Open Cup against whoever, right? And get those minutes. I mean, that's what you're missing out on. So he's going to play MLS Next Pro, all season. And what if, we know some MLS Next Pro teams are going to be playing too, so we don't know which players are going to get those opportunities. But that's, to me, it's, let the clubs decide how they're going to do it. But you're right. I mean, there's congestion. So look at the science. Don't push players that you don't want to push, and make these other players available.
The league wants to prioritize 100% Leagues Cup because that's a competition that they've put together with the Mexican League where they're 100% profiting.
All right.
And so that's and that's the deal.
So here's first, let's put up the Union Omaha tweet. My friend Dominic Casiato is the head coach here. In fact, it was his first year, coach of the year. They won the Shield, and this is USL League One. And the bold, we're proud of it. That means being in the U.S. Open Cup, like so many other American soccer clubs over the last 108 years. So they're certainly making a strong statement towards the folks at Major League Soccer.
I mean, there's a big trophy at the end of this. Not only just the trophy, mind you, but if you win it, so it puts you right into Champions Cup. I mean, it's important.
I think a lot of people have read James Knowlton, works for The Guardian and others, and he follows New York City and MLS quite closely and the metropolitan area in the lower leagues. Anyway, he put up this tweet, and so MLS put out this promotional kind of caricature of a lot of different players and some of the broadcasters. Can we put that up? There it is.
Are you there?
So
I don't see you.
So I'm not there. No. Neither one of us are there. Okay. It's the Apple people.
Oh, of course.
Anyway, so I would have never seen this. So James, you are the man. So in this caricature, there is the Columbus Crew holding up MLS Cup. There is who won the Supporter Shield?
That was New England? No. Cincinnati.
Cincinnati won the Supporter
Cincinnati.
Shield. Yeah, I can't quite see it, but they're holding up the Supporter Shield. It's Miami.
It's down there, right? Is that it?
That could be it.
Yeah.
Miami won the Leagues Cup, and you could see that's sort of right in the bottom and in the middle.
Of course.
The
because
one
it's missing.
trophies, it's not there. How do you think the Houston Dynamo feels? They won U.S. Open Cup, and it's not there.
Yeah.
It's not there. Here's what I wrote. I'm not putting it up here, but lame, all in capitals, LAME, lame. I can't. It's funny though in a way too. It's kind of comical. But James, thanks for sharing that because it's just like Messi. Messi made in America or whatever, and the U.S. Open Cup games aren't on there either. And that's before all this really happened, where there's.
Well, if you saw that. And now you know what you know. It was like, oh, okay, this is what they're doing.
Exactly.
They had started this thought process. Actually, they had started this thought process since last year when Don Garber said it's not beneficial for something to the effect of it's not beneficial for MLS teams to be playing in these smaller stadiums that have like bad fields and sort of. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so that's when that was the first seed. That was the first seed that was planted.
I remember that.
Where that was going.
Yep. Okay. So, I'm sure we'll be reporting more on the U.S. Open Cup and see what's happening with New York City FC specifically, and because the other rumor out there, and again, this is a report unconfirmed, please, but Stu Holden, who many people know from Fox, but he was also a national team player, and U.S. Open Cup committee. He's part of the committee. Apparently, he handed in his resignation. Now, again, that's a report, no confirmation. But if that's true, then I think we know where he stands in terms of U.S. Open Cup and MLS communication on all this. Hey, I went in with one story. I coached at LIU Brooklyn, right?
Yes, you did.
And the facilities there have been upgraded since I left, of course. We used to play in the cage. Actually, the soccer teams don't even play there anymore. There's no more Division I soccer at LIU Brooklyn. It's now out in Long Island at CW Post. But a basketball game, there was somebody tweeted this out. Fairleigh Dickinson and LIU, they're in the same conference. Fairleigh Dickinson universities were stuck in the elevator at LIU Brooklyn, and the game was delayed. It was so comical to me because, well, the elevators, the parking, there were a lot of things that, didn't always function, the way maybe they should have. And so I saw that. I was like, oh, my God.
Are you sure that they weren't trying to gain an advantage?
Well,
I mean, like in the Boston, the old Boston Garden, where it was in the middle of the summer, not only was there no air conditioner, but they would put the heat on in the visiting locker room.
Oh, what a facility that was. Thank God Fenway Park is still up. And Yankee Stadium Part 2.
Well, it's a different stadium.
Yeah.
At least Fenway Park is the original Fenway Park.
Well, Yankee Stadium, that's where the home opener for New York City FC will take place. And it's going to be the Portland Timbers. Is that right?
That's the first game?
March 9th. I forget. It was somebody that they played at Coachella. They're playing again. Isn't it the Timbers?
I haven't looked that far ahead. Honestly, I have not looked. Wait, I actually have the schedule right in front of me. So
yes, it is Portland. It's a 2 p.m. Eastern game on March 9th. So I had that right. Portland with Phil Neville, New York City with Nick Cushing. Good friends will go at it in the home opener for New York City.
And that will be at Yankee Stadium. Actually, the first two home games are at Yankee Stadium against Portland and Toronto. Then they go to Cincinnati and Miami. Boy, you go to Miami in March. That's perfect. I love it.
But Cincinnati and Miami backed up. But look at April, all at home. I think the key month in New York City season, to me, is the month of April at home for 4 consecutive matches.
5. Then,
well, that's May. I got to that. 4 in May, 4 in April, and then the first weekend in May.
Yeah.
5 straight home games. That against Charlotte, D.C., New England, Atlanta, and who am I living out in Colorado? So there's got to be a lot of points gained in that stretch, in my opinion.
Yes.
In my humble opinion.
In those 5 games that you have in a row from April 6th to May 5th, 3 games at Citi Field, 2 at Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
So, and as far as there was only 2 games at the end of the season in October, which is TBD, which will depend upon if either the Mets or the Yankees don't make the playoffs. And then they'll play those 2 home games in whichever stadium is there. If not, it's probably back at Red Bull Arena.
Or TBC. You said TBD. What is TBC? To be called?
I guess I have it as TBD, which is to be determined.
Well, it's it'll be scheduled. It's,
or
in
to
some
be
ways.
decided.
To be decided. That's
to
still
be
D.
determined.
That's
either
still
or,
D.
same thing.
All right, Roberto, good stuff. Thanks so much to New York City FC sporting director David Lee for sitting with us and answering our questions. Hopefully that provided some information to supporters that will help them feel comfort going into 2024. The big opener Saturday night, nycfc.com/radio, 7:15 airtime, kickoff 7:39 p.m. if they're sticking with the same
most
Apple
likely,
schedule.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll join us. I know there's going to be a bunch of watch parties. I've seen the emails come in. You can turn the sound down on the TV. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
if you want, you can
do what you need to do.
get-
In
do
Spanish,
what you
it
need
sounds
to do.
better. It's okay.
Yeah, all right. I've got Nick Cushing though.
I
You've got Sandy
Santi.
Rodriguez. Hey, you got two
I got
good.
Santi.
Two
We
good
got
pregame guys.
we got good ones. So
All
definitely listen in. Tell everybody to listen in either English or Spanish on the radio. It's on the app or nycfc.com/radio. You can find us there. So it's quite easy. It doesn't matter where you are. I mean, literally,
It's true.
where you are, you can listen.
A friend from Wilmington, North Carolina says, that game on the same link this year? I said, yes, sir. So he'll tune in. By the way, podcast On Frame that I host. There's a bunch of good interviews on there from Coach Held, including Nick Cushing and Burke Reese. So pick it up if you'd like to listen to that as well. So for Roberto Abramowitz and Sammy, our producer, who's done a great job, and we're flooding him with stuff today. I'm Glenn Crooks on NYCFC Views.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast NYCFC Views on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.